Good morning, everybody. I'm Isidro Salusky, and I would like to give you some hints of how to write these K applications that, as Mitch said, we've been doing this workflow for a number of years. And I just want you to feel free to ask a lot of questions, and because it's virtual, and maybe the communication obviously will not be the same as usual, but obviously feel free also to have further questions that you cannot answer, send me an email, connect with me or Mitch or Carol, but the communication we would like to be really open, and just we would like to help you with the now what's with the preparation of your K Award. Now, why I cannot move forward? Okay, you are. Okay, so the K Award is really, why is jumping now? It's a kind of supervised research experience by which you get trained in some specific area of medicine during this period that you obtain this award. The important thing just to keep in mind is that there are some specific details that varies between institutes where you are applying. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. Some institutes, for example, they do not accept KO8 award. And so, and in general, these awards are between 3 to 5 years according to your specific background. And you have to devote 75% of your time for the development of this award. And now let me just go to the nuts and bolts of the application. I just went over to the last update from NIH, so I think I have everything, the last thing that they suggested. Maybe I forgot something, but I think I was on top of everything. So the specific aim is 1 page, and we are going to go over each of these different sections with details. But overall, so we have 1 page for the specific aim, and then you have 12 pages in which you divide with your career development section and your research strategy. So more or less 50-50%. Then you have a section on the bibliography, a section on human subjects, and then whether you use vertebrates or selected specific agents. And there is a section called scientific rigor and biological variables. We will come up to each of these sections with detail. So now it's important also to have a cover letter. It's important also when you ask people to write letters on your behalf outside your mentors, these letters need to arrive to NIH at the time of the deadline. This is very important. And then the rest of the documents, the mentor and commentor and consultant, all those material will go with the application. But it's important that when you ask reference that you can have a maximum of 5, those individuals send the reference to the NIH at the time of deadline or just before. So you have an important thing. So you have a primary mentor, which is the individual with expertise that will be your primary mentor. And also you can have some co-primary mentors, and I will come back to this in a little bit. But what's important is that mentor is a recognized and accomplished investigator with a track record of success with previous investigators. And also it's important that mentor currently have NIH funded. There are a lot of people that were successful mentors a number of years ago, but today they do not have NIH funded. Even if this individual is a terrific mentor, for you it's not good, because I'm telling you, I sit in the study section and I go over these things, study section go over this issue with a lot of detail. If this individual today doesn't have current funding, is a weakness as a primary mentor. Maybe because of his or her own expertise that is unique, maybe he or she can be a co-mentor or collaborator, because this individual will provide you some specific expertise. But as your primary mentor, this individual has to have current NIH funding, number one. Number two is obviously sometimes it's important that this mentor has enough expertise and funding, because he or she, from his or her funding, can also be allowed to help you with your own research. And obviously the co-mentors, have to have also complementary research expertise that will be important for your application. So let's go back to the issue of the mentor, because I think it's critical that you identify individuals who have experience, are available, they're interested in working with you, that you look at the track record with previous mentee, as I mentioned, that he or she has appropriate grant support. And I go back to this issue of two senior mentors. Sometimes, and I've done this, suppose that you have an application in which maybe a more clinical-based investigator and a basic science together can be the co-mentor of the application, because they have complementary expertise. And so in the case, for example, when they write the letter, both of them can sign the letter together, and they can explain which is the role of each of them and why both of them can be co-primary mentor. I have done it successful with a couple of individuals, and I know this has been done by others. So it's something that you need to think according to the specific area of expertise that you are working on. I just want to emphasize the issue of the mentor. The mentor doesn't have to be somebody from your division or your department. And so it has to be somebody with whom you will establish a long-term relationship. So it's important that you think about this individual and know about his or her own track record, how do they work together. And so it's very important that this, it's kind of like any couple relationship that you initiate. And it's important that you know the track record of this individual when you start working with him or her and decide how you will move forward. And it's very important, because I can tell you that I sometimes surprised about the number of you that over the year have conflict with mentors. I run one of these workshops, the workshop and the classes that we do every month through the CTSI, and I hear your problem with mentors, and some of them have been very well-established investigators at UCLA. And so it's important that you think about this individual and what he brings to you and how the two of you can work together. And so, because it's a critical process that you will be building in the years to come. So this relationship is extremely important. Now, obviously, you need to demonstrate also that the CTSI, the institution is committed to your award. And, and I come back to this in a little bit. So let's start first with your candidate background, because as I mentioned to you, the application has the specific aims, and the other section is what we call the research strategy. But this research strategy is 12 pages. 6 of them are devoted to your background and your career development and the relationship with your mentor. And it's important that you do it that very careful, because you are scored by that. At the end of my talk, I will show you how the study section scored those grants. So you can have a terrific science, but if your background and your career development is weak, you will lose points. So it's very important that as a candidate, you describe your commitment to an academic career and why you want to do it, and you show your ability to interact with other collaborators. And it's important in your background to describe your prior training activities and how you relate these to what you want to do with this project, and your long-term career plans. So you need to describe your research effort to this point, and it's important you highlight your previous research experience and publications. Publications, there is no a magic number, but you have to have publications. I don't know, people say 4, 5, 6, whatever, some number of publications, because maybe you can have 2 or 3 in high impact journal, but you have to have publications. One thing that I would really would not recommend that you quote abstracts. The study section look at your bio sketch, and many of you, just to put numbers, quote abstract. And that is negative because people know the difference between an abstract and a publication. So just put the real publication. Do not, my recommendation is not to include abstract in your bio sketch. And also in your background, you have to describe, obviously, as I mentioned, your research interests, the evidence that you will become an independent investigator, and your commitment for 75% of your time. And this is also something that the mentor and your department chair has to agree in their letter that you will have 75% of your time committed for this project. Now, in your letter, it's important you need to show some type of a progression from your prior research experience, your training experience, and where are you moving, and how you are planning to become an independent investigator. And also, it's very important that you justify the need for further career development training to become an independent investigator. For those of you, for example, who are PhD, that got a postdoc, and maybe you're applying for a K08 or K01, it's important that you justify why you need further training. You became an expert on this, but you need to do why in order to learn this technique and apply it to the model that you are planning to study. Now, and it's important here, and I put it in red because I think it's something that you need to emphasize, how your line of work in the future will differ from your mentor. So it's important that you don't cut and paste or copy the same line of work that your mentor is doing. And so you don't have to put but some way in the details that you are providing, you can say how your mentor worked on this area and how your line of work at one time will make some difference with the work of your mentor. Whether you stay at UCLA, it's important that is very clearly demonstrated. Where you move away, is also it's important that you identify a line of work that will lead to independence from your work, from your mentor, in order for you to become an independent investigator. And it's important also that you will utilize all the relevant research and educational resources that we have here at UCLA, and they're huge. And so, as you know, this is a big institution, and the CTSI, in one way or the other, can help you how you identify the different resources according to for example, if you are in the neuroscience area, health service research area, cardiovascular area, etc. So the resources are, you can tailor the UCLA resources according to what is your area of expertise and where are you moving forward. It's important that when you prepare this career plan, you work together with your mentor, because your letter and his or her letter need to match. Sometimes I've seen applications in which you say that the trainee will do X, Y, and Z, and the mentor letter doesn't translate at all what you are planning to do. So that lack of communication, it really runs into problems when the grant is reviewed and you lose point by this lack of integration between what are you planning to do, and how the mentor see your work and implementation. So it's important that you and your mentor work together in the development of this career development plan, and the timeline and all these things are very consistent between what you are saying and what the mentor letter will support. Regarding there is a component also of the didactic that I come back to this in a little bit, and also there is a component, as I mentioned before, of this commitment for the 75% effort. So when you look at your career development plan, so the key issues are the formal coursework between meetings and seminars, the mentorship plan, the scientific meetings and papers that you are planning to do. You need to develop a career development timeline and a plan to independence. Maybe also it's important to know that the CTSI has a library of successful K awardees, and that you can take a look and figure out what aspects you can take from those grant application for your own application. You should not reinvent the wheel. You be able to use those resources. You can modify any way you want, but I feel that the CTSI library is very useful. These are all grants that got funded, and so I think you should look and figure out what element of those grants you can use just for the presentation of your own application. Now, regarding the coursework, there are many ways of doing this, but you have to be specific. And the formal coursework that you will take. So, for example, whether you will do the Master in Clinical Research, you will enroll in courses. So these are examples, okay? But you need to be very specific. You need to put the number, the title of the course, these are examples, but it's very important that you are very specific. You can take courses from the School of Public Health, the School of Engineering, the School of Medicine, the CTSI, whatever courses you are going to take according to your area of expertise. Be specific. Don't tell them that we are going to do courses in molecular biology without being specific. So all these issues, the more specific you are in the type of course, when they are going to take it, the first semester, the second semester, whatever, during the period of the award, it's very important that you show details. And so this is part of the timeline that I was referring. And these are issues that the reviewers look at that very carefully. And remember, 50% of your points come from this career development. Again, remember that you can have a terrific scientific approach, but if this is not very good, you will lose points. So it's as important as your research. So both of them is something that you have to take time in the preparation. Now, I go back to this issue about the statement by your mentor, about in which he or she in their letter need to explain your research qualification, your previous experience, and also their previous experience as mentor, their track record, what they have done, the type of supervision that they will provide during the time of the award, and how the mentor see your progression as you becoming an independent investigator. Also, it's important that the mentor mention his plan or her plan about your publications and then progression to independence. And it's important that in his or her letter, they document their track record of funding. It's very important that they communicate the track record of funding, and also how the courses that you will be taking, he or she they integrate those courses in their letter. So it's important that all these issues are complementary, and that's the reason that these letters, the one that you describe yourself and the one that the mentor does his or herself, they are well coordinated. Again, as I mentioned before, some of you may be in the need two co-primary mentors. And so if that is the case, then there's only one letter signed by both commentors in which the two of them clearly describe their expertise and why is this complementary expertise is required for your grant. For that people who have a more clinical background versus those individuals that have a more basic science background. I have done it successful with a number of candidates over the years, and it works. It's important that you do that and you define that very well. So, and now you can have co-mentors because they have the primary mentors and the co-mentors. Those co-mentors, these are individuals that they will provide additional support for your application. And again, you need to explain the role of why you need this individual to be part of your mentorship team. And sometimes I can tell you that the co-mentor even doesn't have to be from your own institution. I give you an example. I am a co-mentor of an individual currently funded with a K23 from UCSD. Why? Because I am providing him with expertise that doesn't exist at UCSD. And it's fine. We meet on a regular basis and he comes over here, a video, etc. It works. So sometimes if you need some specific expertise that they have it in Chicago, just do use that individual as your commentor because of the specific expertise that we don't have it here at UCLA. So these issues are something that very acceptable as long as you justify correctly why it's important and how the monitoring between these two individuals, this individual and you, will be performed during the course of your award. For example, for this individual from UCSD, in his own grant, he put some money for coming to UCLA every few months to stay for a couple of 2-3 days. And, we told the story, which that's what we are doing, and then video conference and meeting with his mentor at UCSD. So the whole work is what you develop, what we call a mentorship team. And so we have your primary mentor and your co-mentor who are part of your mentorship team, and just to maximize your training during this period of your life. You can have also consultants, that these people don't have to provide BioSketch, but maybe they have some specific, again, expertise that is important for your training. Maybe some imaging techniques, some scientific expertise in the laboratory, or whatever you need to do. But it's important that, again, this individual could be a consultant. There is a letter required for them, but they are not just, they provide some specific expertise that is not available at UCLA in this case. Also, there is a section on the conduct of research and the responsibility of research, and there are many workshops, and you have to put a section on that. And for example, and there are many workshops about the conduct of research that we can have it here through the CTSI. There are a number of them that you have to include in the application. So let's move on now to the specific of the grant, the specific aims. As I mentioned to you, the specific aim is 1 page. Then you have the candidate background and the research strategy, that is 12 pages. The training on the responsible of the conduct of research is 1 page. And then you can see here the mentors' letters and co-mentors is a total of 6 pages. And then you have a description of the environment and then the institutional commitment for your career. So let's go back to the aims. So what do we do in the aims? What do we intend to do? So, writing a grant is selling. You need to get the reviewer excited. You say, oh, this is a cool stuff. And so it's important that when the reviewer look at your grant, read the first page, the aims, he or she get excited about it. So you need to sell. And so what they are basically, you decide what do you intend to do. And we are going to go into this issue in a second. The research strategy, as I mentioned, have the two components, the career development that we talk a little bit, and then you have to, you go to the specific research strategy that have different sections. There is a section of significance in which you put the background of what you propose to do in the context of your work. There is a section of innovation. We need to say what is new and why it's important that you do this work. And then there is the approach in where you will describe what are you planning to do to achieve the specific, the specific aims. So the aims is one page, and there are different styles, ways of doing writing aim, but it's something that it takes many versions of the aim. So obviously you need to have some initial introduction to the topics and some broad enough, providing the background of what you are planning to do, but focus just to follow through your specific project. So concisely, you need to describe a little bit in that first background of the topic that you are going to address, some specific broad spectrum of the statement that you want to study, and then from there narrow down to what is lacking in the field, why this is important, that will move you to some of your questions that you would like to address, and then lead you to the specific aims and the hypotheses that you would like to address. Now, it's important that you focus on the aim. And you have to write it 1,000,000 times. And it's important also that at one time, and this is something that you work closely with your mentor about how you are moving in that direction. And sometimes it's important also, once you think you are kind of close to a final stage of that aim, that you can show it to some colleagues and people who can also give you, outside your mentor, that can give you some feedback about how do they read, because it's important they are very clear, and the reviewer look at the aim and there they have a feeling, I like it, I don't like it. And so it's important that you establish that message very, very clear. The research strategy, as I mentioned, it has different sections. So one is the significance, and it's not, you can say 1, 2 pages, 1.5 pages, but they are really, you outline a little bit of the background of your proposal, but it's important that you kind of evaluate what is known in the field critically, in the area that you are working, what is supporting information about the study, the topic that you are working, what are conflicting data from the literature, even if you have some of your own data, if you have them, what is the gap where you need to fill more information in order to address the problem that you are studying. And maybe it's also important that when you are developing this background, that you try to link some of these statements to your hypothesis and long-term objective. So it's important that to understand that the significance is not a general overview. It's important that you highlight important features in that topic. And obviously, I'm kind of very broad in this regard because it can have many, many directions. But you need to provide perspectives and develop some concepts. Now, it's important here that always in the literature there are conflicts. One group published this, the other group published the opposite, or that do not support the data. There are conflicts. This is basically, it happens. And so you need to understand those conflicts, and there your mentor can help you, and be important that you quote the appropriate literature. It's very important that you know that literature very well, and then what are the conflicts. And you need to be very knowledgeable about that, diplomat and precise, because the study section for K Award is a mix of people with different backgrounds. But it could be that one of the reviewers in that study section is one of those that you quote the literature or reference from this individual. And if you don't do it correctly, you pay a price. And so it's very important that you are diplomatic, precise. This issue of the reference is critically important. And I have to tell you that, I don't know, I think it's something that be sure for some specific statement that you are making is that you know exactly which is that specific reference that made that statement. You know, all of us, we write reviews and review articles and chapters, etc. But I personally, I think it's better to go to the reference where that statement was published in a peer-reviewed journal, where this investigator found X, Y, and Z and demonstrate this specific finding. So be very precise and respect the type of reference that you are using, because I've seen in the study section, I have to tell you that sometimes reviewers, for some reason, they get upset because they misquote the reference. And so you pay the price for those things. So be very careful when you do this type of, the reference and be very diplomatic. And also it's important that when you go into the significance is that you make the review easy. So develop consistent sequence of patterns in your discussion, lead to how those statements that you are making are related to your hypothesis and specific aims. And this is an issue that you have to carry out through the different sections. And here in the significance, it's important to think about when you put tables or figures about concept that you want to develop, because what you want to do is you want to facilitate the task of the reviewer, because the specific aim was on page 1. Your approach will be on page 9 or 10. So maybe by then the reviewer forgot a little bit what were all the 2 or 3 specific aims that you raised. And so it's important that when you are building the story, that you think about places that you put your figures and tables, that just to make the life of the reviewer a little bit easier. There is a statement that is called now scientific premise. And what they want you to do is to describe the strengths and weakness of the published data. And for example, when you can have a statement at the end of your significance, I give you an example of something that I have been involved. For example, the rationale of our proposal is strongly supported by the published data in humans and animal studies as our own preliminary data. So what they want to know is that the way that I see this statement about scientific premise is that those statements are well justified by data in humans, in animals, and your own data, and why this is important. So that is something that is an example, but you have to put a few lines regarding the scientific premise. So the innovation. The innovation is maybe half a page, but they want you to identify areas that they are missing and why the innovation is needed to fill up a gap. And so focus the attention of the reviewer, make it interesting, sell the product, provide new information, and offer new perspectives. So why this section of the innovation is bullet, that you put there based on what you think that why this project is novel. That's what they want to do. They want you to show what is new with this project? So based on what you have said in the significant, based on maybe some preliminary data that you have, this issue, you need to highlight it very clearly. This is novel because of boom, 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 boom. So you have some bullets and you say, this will lead to important new hypotheses and fill gaps in our current knowledge. Together, the aim, significant, and innovation really should provide an integrated approach to what you would like to, why you justify this project. They have to fit all together, okay? So the approach section is, you can start with preliminary data. I think personally, it's important to have some preliminary data. Some people put the grants without much preliminary sometimes. Personally, I think it's better to have some preliminary data show that you've been working on that field and you know whatever you've been doing and how from those preliminary data help you to support your hypothesis. You have to describe how the work that needs to be done and how you will address each of the specific aims to test this hypothesis. And it's important that how this experiment it will address the specific hypothesis that you have raised. So this really, the approach varies tremendously on the type of grant that you are writing. If you are writing a grant with some more K08, more on basic biology of a problem, where you use in vitro and animal data. If you are writing a grant on health service research, it's another approach. If you are writing a study in humans, it's another approach. So obviously what I am giving you here are different approach. But the organization is important and it has to have a logical sequence. For example, what type of methods that you're going to use, the study design, the laboratory, the statistical procedures that you will use, you need to justify. If you are doing experiments, those type of methodology you will use, etc. So these are important things that this overview obviously has to be focused according to the type of grant that you are planning to do. So if it is a clinical project, you need to figure out what measurement you will use, the study population that you will use, this kind of thing, the general, the recruitment, longitudinal follow-up, etc. Now, just in general, for K Award, when you are going to do studies in humans, be very careful the type of study that you will put together, because a large clinical trial is not a good approach for a K Award. So it's fine to do studies in humans to study many aspects, but be very careful when you are envisioning some type of investigation, because basically you will be deemed because you are overambitious, and the amount of money that you have will not support a clinical trial, number one, and you will not have enough resources. So be very careful when you set up the type of study that you are planning to do in humans. Now, for the K08 or kind of more laboratory, you need, again, the general methods in this type of cell cultures and the type of analysis that you will do, animal do we use, and be sure that you know the precision and accuracy of each of the methods that you will utilize, and also demonstrate your previous experience, that you know how to do this, but during the period of the grant award, you will learn X, Y, and Z. And that is very important. Sometimes in human studies, for example, if your mentor have a large clinical trial, you can also make some comments about, I will do these studies in human, but through my mentor, U01 or whatever he or she has, you will be becoming more familiar in the performance or monitor of the development of a clinical trial. That's what you are leading to. So you can use your mentor infrastructure as also a tool to learn for yourself and what you would like to develop. When you're doing to experimental procedure, it's also it's important to describe how you will be done, where you will obtain the data, how they will be analyzed, the type of result that you expect. And sometimes you have expected results or unexpected. So you have to have alternative interpretation of the results and whether additional studies need to be performed. So again, those results that you will obtain, you need to interpret them on the with the specific aim that you are proposing or hypothesis that you are raising. So these are issues that is important that to keep in mind when you develop that type of studies. One way of addressing experimental studies, that's one style. You don't have to follow this, but you can say specific aims. I do experiment 1 and 2, specific aim 2. I do the following experiments. So it's important to be consistent, that you follow a consistent path. So it's easy for the reviewer to see where are you going. And so, for example, to address the specific aim, you do the experiment, the procedure, and then you have a section on analysis and interpretation. That's one approach. So the reviewer will look about these issues about, can this individual do this work? Do they have the proven method, the appropriate expertise, the resources, the study population, the background? So these are issues that the reviewer will look when they are evaluating your grant. And here is important also that you think about what you want to do, what your mentor have, and sometimes how you complement a component that you will have from the study that you will do, you propose to do with this K Award, with some additional work that maybe your mentor is doing in that area, because obviously it will be an area similar to you, but can be complementary. And so you can take advantage of that if the mentor, for example, is doing just the beginning of a large clinical trial. Well, you can learn a lot from that experience. And so all those issues, or the mentor is part of a huge program project, or so things that where you can have access, the more you can take access to expertise of your mentor for your own grant and your career development, this is to your advantage. So think about those issues. So, well, then, as I mentioned, you have to have a section on the conduct of research, and there are different workshops. You can look through the CTSI. These are examples of classes you have to take, and then be specific in that section that's responsible for the conduct of research. You can highlight this element, and again, if you go to the CTSI library, and by looking at those grants, they can give you a lot of information that you can tailor according to the type of research that you are going to conduct. This data safety monitoring, I will say it will be extremely unlikely for a K Award, except for those maybe that are going to do some type of phase 2 trial in some oncology grants. But sometimes they need some type of data safety monitoring, but I would say this will be extremely, and if you decide to go to one of that route, be very aware of whether they are required, and your mentor has to play a critical role in whether these need to be included in your application. It's in the grant, in the guidelines, but I personally think it's better not to get in. It seems like something more complicated, but in some specific oncology trials, I've seen that this has been, yes, on phase 1 or phase 2, is required to have a DSMB. But I've mentioned that the others have to arrive, the reference letter from those individuals that you are saying that you are a nice person has to arrive by the submission date, and then we talk about it. The institutional, description of the institution, as I mentioned to you, huge, UCLA is huge, and the CTSI has a lot of description of the different area of expertise at UCLA, and I think I will pick from that area, from the description according to the area that you are working, neuroscience, whatever is the area of research, that they pick the best areas. So I think I will stop here, and I would be happy to, I don't know how we do with the questions now. Do we go to the chat room, or maybe, what do you think?
Thanks, Isidro. I think that we're running a little ahead of schedule, so we can actually take a few question and answers right now before Dr. Mangione gives her talk. So,
Isidro, if it would be helpful for me to read the questions, I could do that.
Yeah. Oh, that would be great. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that would be perfect.
Yeah. So why don't I go ahead and do that, and then you could answer some.
Sure.
So there's a question from Derek Monroe, and he asks how important it is that all mentors come from your institution. Could you have a primary from UCLA and a co from UCI? He said later, I think you answered that already, but if you had any other things you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important that one primary mentor is very important, is from your institution, because this is the individual with whom you will pass by his or her office, walking, connecting every week, etc. So it's very important that one primary co-mentor be here. Now, if that individual, when I mentioned about two co-primary mentors, I was more inclined to think about both individuals being at UCLA. I will be a little bit concerned of picking a co-primary mentor from another institution, because of basically distance is a problem. And the primary mentor is somebody with whom you see in the daily basis, easy access, walking. So I will really, if you pick somebody, a co-primary from another institution, I will describe very specifically why this is the person has to be, because he or she has this terrific expertise on this methodology, and he and my primary mentor work together. You need to build a story why this individual has to be a co-primary. It can be a mentor, a co-mentor, that's no problem. But the co-primary is a little bit higher level of commitment, and also contact, that you see this individual weekly in the lab meeting, part of your daily life.
Thanks. The next question is from—
Can I just add something to that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just would say that, as director of the KL2 program, we've seen a bunch of our KL2 scholars move on to individual Ks, and we advise a lot of K awardees, applicants at UCLA, and see them get their K. I would say of the many faculty that we've seen successfully get a K award, it's been extremely rare for any of those successful applications to identify a mentor outside UCLA, if they're UCLA faculty. Now, it has been done, but I think almost in every instance where someone identified one of their mentors, even not a primary mentor, one of the co-mentors, as being a faculty outside of their own institution, it has almost always raised a flag. So it doesn't mean you can't do it, but if you do choose a mentor outside your institution, there needs to be a really quite good explanation for why you've chosen that person. And I think a very common reaction among the study section, because the study section tends to be very large, invariably they'll know someone at that institution who, they may know someone at your institution who has expertise in an area. And so one of the first questions comes to mind is, well, why aren't they working with that person? So if you choose someone outside your institution, you definitely want to make sure there's no one at your own institution who has similar equivalent expertise. And that would be the main reason to pick someone outside your institution, is that that expertise is just better from someone outside, because they really are the world's expert in this particular technique or this content area. And if you do choose someone outside your institution, you really need to make it clear why that person is committed to you, because there's going to be the question of, can they make that commitment? And so one obvious evidence for commitment is that you've already published with that person. If you haven't published that person, you really need a lot of detail about exactly how you're going to work with that lab, that person. And in some cases, we've seen it. The people have budgeted travel and time to go work in that person's lab for 4 weeks out of the year, or some equivalent level of commitment that's very concrete.
Yeah, can I make a comment to Mitch? That's exactly what he's right. For example, this person that I'm commenting from UCSD, his mentor at UCSD and I have been working together for a while. So we have a track record of collaboration. I didn't publish with the mentee, but I work with his mentor. And he and I, we've been working together for the last few years. So this is very important that you describe a little bit the history of why you picked that person and what type of track record of collaboration between the two places exists.
The other thing that I would like to add is that there has to be very careful harmonization between what you say that person's role is, why you pick them, what their responsibility is going to be in the proposal, and what their letter of support says. You know, so, you know, if you're saying so-and-so is going to let me come to their lab for 4 weeks, then their letter of support should say, you know, I'm so happy to have Dr. Brown coming to my lab for 4 weeks and, you know, the first year of the award to learn X, Y, and Z. And so, you know, everything has to harmonize, look very specific. And I think making that compelling case that the expertise wasn't at your home institution, as Mitch noted, is really important.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's go on to the next question. This question is from Monica Kelly, and it says, can you please speak to whether it would be appropriate or not to have one single letter for the mentor team, perhaps with separate sections for each individual mentor's contribution to submit and sign together versus individual letters from each mentor?
Well, that's a good question. I think it is very important, you know, just Carol mentioned before, this integration of the letters. It's very important that everybody describe very well their role in your career. That's number one. Regarding one letter, I personally have done one letter for co-primary mentors, that both of them have signed the letter. I think the role of the primary mentor is very important. So I will be inclined to have one letter from the primary mentor. This is, to me, is very important because the reviewer put a lot of, you are really funded, or you will be funded, basically in the track record of the primary mentor. They want to know who this individual is, his or her background, track record, etc. So I will not be very excited about put one letter for everybody, and because the co-mentor, each of them have a specific role on your project, and they should, I will put it in separate letter. That will be my approach. I don't know what you, Mitch or Carol, think about it, but that would be my approach.
I think your approach sounds good. There's a related question from the next person, Sharif Mohammed Ridwan, who asks, what if I'm in a lab where the PI doesn't have a great track record, but I have a new idea which seems promising to try? Does it mean I probably will not be successful and I'll have to find a new lab or PI with a great track record first?
If the PI of your lab doesn't have a good track record, I will not use him or her. That's simple. Now, if you have a great idea and you can test your idea in another lab, or staying in the lab where you are, but the mentor will be somebody else. But I will not go with a PI that doesn't have a good track record. And that is very risky, even if it is a great idea, because basically they don't know you, they don't know what are you planning to do. So a lot of what you plan to do is based on the PI, on the mentor track record. So I would say it's very risky. I would be a little bit concerned about it.
Mitch, anything to add to that?
I think Isidro's 100% right, and it can get tricky. Obviously, Sharik, you have a track record with your current PI, and you don't want to sever that relationship. I think often, it's a PI who might be a little junior, so hasn't had time to develop a track record. So there's a potential. One solution would be to find another very successful senior PI to serve as your primary mentor, and have the PI that you work most closely with, the one the lab that you're currently in, to be a co-PI. That way you don't sever that relationship, but you bring in someone new who can ensure that your success is going to be, the chance of your success is high.
I think we have time for one more question. For those of you who you didn't get your questions answered now, if at the end of the session we'll have a longer time for Q&A. I know Isidro has to go back to clinical work, so if there's something specific for him, we'll make sure to triage the question. But the last question we'll take today is from, my Zoom just moved here, from Tayo Ikotun, asking, can K Awards be used to learn a new technique or technology? If so, should the applicant's publication history also be in the new area, or just in general?
Yeah, no, the K Award definitely can be used to learn a new technology, and you don't have to have any publications on the new technology. What you need to do is to justify what you have learned with the technology that you've done in the past, and why is needed for you and for your work to learn that new technology. On the contrary, that's exactly what the K Award should be. Whatever technology you have done over the years, and then you want to move one step further because the phenomenon that you want to study requires such technique. Yeah, definitely, that is a good, and it's important you explain that and why it's important for you to learn such technique. Absolutely, yeah.
So Isidro, thank you so much.